Welcome to Star Wars Characters Explained. Before we go any further, if you've not yet seen Chapter 1 of Revan's story, I highly recommend going back to that before watching this one, so you can get the full understanding of Revan's character as a whole as we go forward. For returning viewers, welcome to Chapter 2, The Descent of Revan. In this episode, we're looking at the time period of 3961 BBY to 3957 BBY. To quickly recap the past chapter, Revan had just discovered the Traya's Academy on Malachor 5 and begun to be seduced by the dark side. He created the Sith assassins in secret to combat the true Sith threat hiding in the unknown regions and return to war. He then taught Alec the secrets of the dark side. Now, let's discover what happens next. Despite being under the influence of the dark side, Revan and Alec continued to fight for the Republic, and they didn't denounce their commitment to the Jedi Order. The Republic led some of their forces to Taris in a bid to drive the Mandalorians off the planet. Revan joined them and travelled to the Undercity to free a group of slaves that were on the verge of being sold. It was here that Revan first met the young KOTOR called Juhani. The newly freed slave was inspired by Revan's actions and was convinced by another Jedi in Revan's party to travel to Dantooine and join the Order. Shortly after, Cassius Fett launched a major offensive in Jaga's cluster. Revan and Alec were both involved in the battle, but despite their efforts, the Republic suffered a major defeat. In retaliation, the Republic pushed forward to the Mandalorian strongholds on Onderon and its moon Duxon. While a section of the Republic attacked Onderon, Revan and his third attacked Duxon. The battle would go on to become one of the bloodiest battles of the war, and despite the victory, they lost countless amounts of lives. Revan drew the strategic plans of the battle, and ordered General Mitra Surik to lead the campaign. They sacrificed many lives by sending pockets of soldiers to scout out hidden defences within the jungle. These soldiers rarely returned, but were usually successful in disabling the defences, allowing the rest of Mitra's forces to press on towards the Mandalorian strongholds. It was said that for every Mandalorian soldier that was killed, the Republic paid with 10 of their own. Either way, the war was slowly drawing to a close after Revan's forces had managed to annihilate a hefty portion of the Mandalorian military during the Second Battle of Ulthir. But it was at Malachor 5, the place where Revan had fallen to the dark side, that the ultimate battle of the Mandalorian Wars would take place. Prior to the Second Battle of Ulthir, Revan had ordered the engineer Baeodor to secretly develop a superweapon known as the Mass Shadow Generator, which would act as the centerpiece of his plan to destroy the Mandalorians and bind the remaining Jedi to him and the dark side at Malachor 5. Revan's plan had come to fruition, and he forced the final battle of the war to take place on and around Malachor 5. He deployed almost half of the Republic fleet to the planet, led by Mitra Surik, and they were aided by a substantial amount of Jedi, many of whom were not at this point completely loyal to Revan. The aim was to lure the remaining Mandalorian forces in range of the Mass Shadow Generator, and the opportunity to go down fighting was irresistible to them, so they took the bait. What resulted was a colossal naval battle above the planet, with some minor skirmishes taking place on the surface. Revan had planned to flank the Mandalorians by bringing in the rest of his fleet a little while later to directly engage Mandalore the Ultimate's personal flagship, but he was delayed outside of the system by Mandalorian scouts. When he arrived, the battle was on a pendulum, but this was working to his plan. The battle had grown extremely intense, and the dark side nexus of the planet was alluring to the Jedi who were fighting. With emotions running wild, the Jedi were becoming vulnerable to the dark power emanating from the Academy on the planet. Most of the Jedi were unable to resist the call of the dark side due to their wills being broken over the course of the war, and it was during this battle that the Jedi under Revan's command were seduced by the dark side. With everything going to plan, Revan's forces begun to overcome the Mandalorian forces, and in a desperate attempt to cut off the head of the snake, Mandalore the Ultimate contacted Revan, asking to honourably battle him in single combat. Revan accepted, and faced Mandalore aboard his flagship. However, Mandalore, despite his best effort, was no match for the fallen Jedi Knight and was struck down, bleeding to death at Revan's feet. Mandalore removed his mask, and while coughing up blood told Revan that he had been betrayed. Revan was curious, and asked Mandalore to explain. He told Revan that he was manipulated by a man of red skin, that he was convinced to help uncover a Sith tomb on the planet Rekiad. Once they had found it, the red-skinned man then convinced him to begin a war against the Republic. In honour of his victorious opponent, Mandalore gave Revan the coordinates to Rekiad to prove his story, and he then died a few minutes later. With their leader defeated, the Mandalorian forces were in disarray, but this was not enough for Revan. The remaining Mandalorian forces were pushed to within proximity of the planet's atmosphere. Revan contacted Mitra and told her it was time. With her flagship at a safe distance, she looked to Bao-Dur and simply nodded. Bao-Dur then activated the mass shadow generator, and Malachor 5 fractured from inside, being ripped apart by the gravity vortex. All forces within range, both Mandalorian and Republic, were torn out of orbit and crashed into what was left of the shattered world. Thousands upon thousands of Mandalorian and Republic soldiers were killed, and the Mandalorians who had managed to survive surrendered. Revan now had the mask of Mandalore and refused to return it to the Mandalorian people, as he knew that a new leader would simply rise up in typical tradition. Without a true leader, the Mandalorians scattered and most became mercenaries and bounty hunters. Revan also knew that despite its success, destruction on the scale of Malachor 5 should never happen again, so he constructed a new assassin droid based off of Circa Corporation's own HK-24 models. This new assassin droid, designated HK-47, was created as a means for Revan to wipe out selective targets secretly and without collateral damage. The Jedi High Council ordered the return of Revan, Malak and Mitra so that they could answer for their crimes against the Jedi Code, but only Mitra accepted. Mitra had cut her own connection to the Force and she couldn't feel the call of the dark side as the other Jedi did. Malak then put across the idea of killing Mitra, but Revan knew that she was already dead of the Force and that there was no point. Revan and Malak proceeded to take what was left of their forces into the unknown regions, claiming this to be a pursuit of any surviving Mandalorians that didn't surrender. Instead, Revan and Malak left their forces in the unknown regions and travelled alone to Rekiad to discover if there was any truth to the deceased Mandalore's story. When they arrived, they found a structure known as the Twin Spears, and within, they found the tomb of the Sith Lord Dramath II. In his sarcophagus, they discovered a datachron that confirmed Mandalore's story, and it also spoke of a planet called Nathema. Before they followed the trail further to Nathema, Revan hid Mandalore's mask within the tomb so that the Mandalorians would never find it again. Revan and Malak landed on Nathema and felt something completely unordinary. The planet was literally dead of the Force. It was a sickening and painful experience for the pair, but they continued to search the planet for clues as to the whereabouts of the true Sith. They found some information detailing the story of a Sith known as Vitiate, who lived during the Great Hyperspace War 1,000 years prior. Vitiate had conducted a ritual using the lives of the remaining Sith Lords to completely exterminate the Force on the planet, killing all life. This ritual gave Vitiate immortality, and he gathered the younger generation of Sith and left for a new planet called Droman Kars. When they travelled there, the two fallen Jedi discovered an entire empire, and they went undercover as mercenaries to discover more about Vitiate, who is now simply known as the Sith Emperor. They discovered the Emperor's plot to invade the Republic, and instead of warning them, Revan and Malak believed themselves capable of killing him. With the help of Yari, a member of the Emperor's Guard, Revan and Malak infiltrated the Imperial Citadel to confront the Emperor. However, Yari was completely dominated by the Emperor's will and led them into a trap. The Emperor was completely prepared for their arrival, and instead of killing them, he reached out to them, dominating their minds. The two were now under the Emperor's control, and he completed their fall to the dark side, filling their minds with knowledge as well as probing information from theirs. He then gave them the titles of Darth Revan and Darth Malak. After learning about the Starforge from their minds, he ordered them to further discover it and sent them back into the Republic as a vanguard for his own invasion. However, he publicly announced to his people that Revan and Malak were spies and claimed that he executed them. It was now 3959 BBY and Revan and Malak returned to known space, beginning the search for the rest of the star maps. Using the information from the maps they already found on Dantooine and Kashyyyk, they found the remaining maps on Manaan, Tatooine and Korriban. While plundering the tombs of the ancient Sith Lords on Korriban, Revan further indulged himself into the knowledge of the dark side. He also found several Sith relics, including Tulak Horde's mask. After finding the last star map inside the tomb of Naga Sadow, the two discovered the coordinates to the planet Lehon. Before they left, Revan created his own Sith holocron using the information he had discovered on Korriban, and it spoke about the relationship of the Sith. This holocron would go down in Sith history, and it would eventually lay the foundations for the Sith rule of two. The two Sith Lords then travelled to Lehon and discovered the Starforge in orbit of the nearby star. However, their ship was pulled into the planet and crashed into an ocean. When they emerged from their downed ship and swam to the beach, they were captured by a Rakatan called the One, a member of a species thought to be long extinct. Revan was unable to understand the ancient language, so he tore it from the One's mind using the Force. He then made a deal with the One to steal a Rakatan tome of knowledge from their rival tribe known as the Elders. In exchange, the One would give Revan access to the Temple of the Ancients, a structure that was key to accessing the Starforge. When Revan and Malak met with the Elders, he decided to join with them instead. He spoke to Lalawa, who was trying to find a way to reconnect his species to the Force, and learned that the Elders wanted to find a way to atone for the Rakatan species' sins. Revan saw this as an easier opportunity to get into the temple, so he promised to destroy the Starforge if they used the tome to give him access. The Elders agreed and opened the temple, but Revan betrayed their trust and instead destroyed the disruptor field blocking their exit from the planet. Revan then left his holocron at the bottom of the temple and left with Malak to the Starforge. The pair boarded the Starforge and were now free from the Emperor's control. However, the Emperor's commands were still deep within their minds, and they began to believe that these thoughts were their own desires. So Revan and Malak began to use the Starforge to construct endless fleets, weapons and war materials to supply their forces. And then they decided to begin their own conquest of the Republic. They declared themselves as leaders of a new Sith Empire and used the loyal forces that followed them into the unknown regions as the foundation of their military power. Revan and Malak quickly established an academy on Korriban to breed new Sith for the Empire, and for a few months Revan studied the Starforge. He took a small fragment of the station, no bigger than his fingertip, for study, and discovered its power was far beyond that of constructing weapons. He learned that the fragment absorbed both basic mass and the Force itself and gave something back in return. This could range from simple things, such as air and water, to even life. He left the fragment on Nar Shaddaa with a group of slaves. This group of slaves saw the Revan as a god and cared for the fragment, which would go on to become the Infinite Engine. The fragment in return gave the slaves everything they needed to survive. What Revan didn't know, however, was that the Starforge was dangerous. It fed upon negative energy and was a machine of the dark side. The Starforge was also partially responsible for the Rakatan Empire's downfall. Revan simply saw the Forge as a factory for his army, and as a matter of fact, apart from the fragment he took and the early construction of his fleet, Revan spent barely any time on board. By 3958 BBY, Revan was ready to start his war, and using his inside knowledge of the Republic military, his first attack was the Republic shipyards on Forost. The Battle of Forost, as it was known, was a major success for Revan, as his forces managed to seize most of the Republic warships stationed there. The First Battle of Revans War, now known as the Jedi Civil War, was already a massive loss for the Republic, and things would only get worse. The Republic officer known as Saul Carath defected to Revan's empire, and shortly after became the commander of the entire Sith fleet. Malak ordered Saul to bombard Telos 4 using his flagship called the Leviathan. This went against Revan's orders, who intended to invade and conquer the planet. It was here that tensions between the two Sith Lords started to form. Revan's memories of a threat in the unknown regions began to resurface, and so he began to utilise HK-47 in assassination missions across the galaxy. He used HK-47 to assassinate political figures, including Mimas Yoon and Lelin Dor, senators of Corellia and Sirocco respectively. He also had HK-47 assassinate a very popular Achani senator. Revan chose to do this so that he wouldn't deal any major damage to the Republic's economic and military functions. Revan had intended to personally rebuild the Republic into a force strong enough to defend itself from an attack from those in the unknown regions. An Achani general known as Usanis discovered Revan's involvement in the Achani senator's death and challenged him to a duel. Revan accepted and easily beat and killed him. Revan then began a partnership with Circa Corporation, offering them territory in exchange for logistical and economic support. Zerka then established their regional HQ in the Dreshdire colony on Korriban, close to the thriving Sith Academy. Revan's main strategy for converting Jedi to the dark side was to torture them until their wills were broken, and he also used the Sith assassins that he secretly formed on Malachor to capture and utilise this strategy. Those who would not turn were killed. By 3957, the tactical genius of Revan that once saved the Republic was now causing them havoc. However, relations between the two Sith Lords soured. Malak wanted to devastate the Republic, whereas Revan wanted to preserve it. Malak made his feelings clear to Revan when they were together on Revan's flagship, and this sparked a major lightsaber duel that would scar Malak for life. Revan took the upper hand in the fight and completely removed Malak's jaw, which required him to constantly wear a respirator. Malak never truly forgave Revan for this, and he was now planning to usurp Revan as the true Dark Lord of the Sith. However, he bided his time. Also around this time, Malak asked HK-47 what he thought of him, and HK-47 referred to him as a meatbag. Revan found this to be extremely comical, so he programmed HK-47 to call all organics meatbags. Revan had also realised that the success of HK-47 was giving him a major advantage in the war, and he knew he would need more like him if he were to maintain the peace when he controlled the Republic, so he ordered the construction of more droids based upon the personality traits and skills of HK-47. These droids would go on to be the HK-50 assassin droids, seen a few years later. Revan never managed to see these droids in action, as his time as Dark Lord was coming to a close. Towards the end of 3957 BBY, the Jedi set a trap for Revan. They sent a small fleet into the Outer Rim as bait for Revan and his forces. When Revan attacked, a small Jedi strike team led by Bastila managed to get aboard his flagship. The battle was being manipulated by Bastila, as she was extremely adept in the use of battle meditation, an ability that enhanced her allies and weakened her enemies. Several Jedi in Bastila's party managed to reach the bridge before her and confronted Revan, but they were no match for the Dark Lord. When Bastila finally arrived on the bridge with 3 other Jedi, it seemed like they were going to share the same fate, but Malak was nearby in his own flagship. He could feel that Revan was in potential danger and finally enacted his plan to overthrow his master. Malak fired upon Revan's ship, and amid the confusion, Bastila force-pushed Revan, knocking him unconscious. But the ship was taking severe damage and Revan sustained some serious injuries. Bastila used her power to protect Revan and managed to get him to a ship in the hangar. The 3 Jedi with her were killed, but Bastila managed to save Revan from his former friend's betrayal. They escaped the critically damaged flagship, and this created a major force bond between the two. Bastila took the comatose Revan to the Jedi Masters on Dantooine, some of whom were Revan's former teachers. Instead of killing him, they decided to completely wipe Revan's mind. So the Jedi Masters joined together, erasing Revan's mind and giving him a new identity as a mere soldier from Deralia. Bastila had also taken Revan's mask, keeping it in secrecy to keep him from discovering his true identity. The Council then decided to utilise the bond between Bastila and Revan to draw out his former memories to discover the truth behind the war. Bastila was given the task of keeping his identity a complete secret, and he was placed on board the hammerhead cruiser known as the Endar Spire before he awoke. But Revan's story is only just beginning, and we've now learned about his origins. His next adventure would go on to cement his place in Republic history, and if you've got this far, you certainly don't want to miss out on what happens next, so be sure to subscribe so you're notified when Chapter 3 of Revan's story is released. Before I leave you, I want to give a quick shout out to 4 active subscribers who I've had the pleasure of chatting with over the past few months. These are Luminaru, XJVNXNB, a person who knows who he is, and George Suarez. Thank you guys for your continued support, it means a lot. As always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like, and of course if you want to see more, perhaps consider force choking that subscribe button. I'll see you guys in Chapter 3, The Redemption of Revan, but until then, may the Force be with you, always.